You ever have one of those moments when your entire life just stops? Like someone hits pause, and the world around you keeps spinning, but you're frozen, stuck between a scream and a whisper? That's exactly how I felt that morning. I remember sitting on the cold bathroom floor, my trembling hands covered in something I never imagined would come from me. The test I'd been holding onto for dear life slipped from my grip, hitting the tiles with a soft clatter. My body ached, but what hurt more was the silence. The silence of a dream dying before it ever took its first breath. I had miscarried, and the only person I wanted to comfort me, my husband, was downstairs, screaming at the TV because his favorite football team was losing. It's strange, you know? How a single day can carve itself so deep into your bones that no amount of therapy or time can scrub it out. I can still smell the cheap candle burning on the sink. I can still hear the faint laughter of kids outside, a cruel reminder of what I'd just lost. And then there was him, the man I thought I loved, the man who should have held me, but instead blamed me. "Luna, you're ruining my birthday," he said. His words cut through the air like glass. I didn't even understand them at first. I just blinked, waiting for him to realize what he'd said. But he didn't take it back. He just stood there, arms crossed, annoyance written all over his face like I had spilled wine on his special day. I remember whispering, "I lost our baby," and he rolled his eyes. "You always make everything about you." That's when something inside me broke. It wasn't just grief anymore, it was rage. Pure, white-hot disbelief that the person I had given everything to could be so cruel, so small. I looked at him and said words I didn't plan to say. They just exploded out of me. "You're a disgrace." For a moment, he froze. Then something dark shifted in his face. He walked toward me, slow at first, then faster, his voice low but shaking. "What did you just call me?" I didn't back down. I should have, but I didn't. I was still bleeding, still dizzy, still raw from loss, and yet I stood up to him. "You heard me," I whispered. "A disgrace," he snapped. His hand went around my throat so fast I barely had time to gasp. His eyes, the same ones that once looked at me with love, were filled with something I can't even describe. Hatred, rage, panic. He didn't squeeze enough to choke me fully, but enough to send a message. "Don't you ever talk to me like that again." When he finally let go, I fell back, coughing, shaking, staring up at the man I no longer recognized. He walked out, didn't look back, just grabbed his keys and slammed the door. I sat there on the kitchen floor, gasping for air, my chest burning, my heart shattered. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just mourning my baby. I was mourning my marriage, my illusion, the life I thought I had. That night I packed a small bag for my son. He was only 2 at the time, and I left. No big plan, no goodbye letter, just raw instinct. Survival. I drove through the rain until I reached my mum's house, the wipers struggling to keep up with my tears. When she opened the door and saw me, she didn't ask a single question. She just pulled me in and whispered, "You're safe now." But safe didn't feel real. I spent the next few days like a ghost. My body felt hollow. My mind replayed everything, his words, his grip, the emptiness in my stomach. I kept asking myself the same question over and over again. How did I not see it sooner? He'd been controlling for years, small things at first. Telling me which friends were bad influences, questioning why I spent too much time with my mum, criticizing how I dressed, what I ate, how I spoke. I thought it was love. I thought he cared too much. But it wasn't love. It was ownership. And now, standing in my childhood bedroom again, surrounded by faded posters and old memories, I realized I had to start over, not for me, but for my son. I didn't know it then, But leaving that night saved both our lives. Because just a few weeks later, I would get a call that would shatter me all over again. I remember the sound before the words, that long, eerie ring that makes your stomach twist even before you answer. It was early morning. My son was still asleep beside me, his tiny hand clutching the corner of my blanket. My phone buzzed across the nightstand, lighting up the dark room with a name I hadn't seen in weeks. His sister. For a moment, I just stared at it. My heartbeat pounded in my throat. I didn't want to answer, but something in me said I had to. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the part of me that still loved him, despite everything. When I picked up, her voice was already broken. Luna. He's gone. I didn't understand. I thought maybe she meant left, or run away, or in jail. Gone didn't make sense, but when she said it again, he killed himself. The air left my lungs. The world went silent. My first thought wasn't anger. It wasn't even sadness. It was disbelief. How could someone who once looked me in the eye and told me I was the reason he lived choose to die? And worse, how could he do it after everything he did to us? I sat there, frozen, as she sobbed into the phone. I could barely hear her words through the static. She said he'd been drinking, that he left a note, that they found him in his car. I didn't ask what the note said. I didn't want to know, because deep down, I already feared it would blame me. For days after that, I lived in a fog. I didn't eat. I barely slept. My mom kept the news from my son, saying he was too young to understand. She was right. He was only 2. He didn't deserve the weight of that truth. But the world doesn't let you grieve in peace. Not when people want someone to blame. His family turned on me instantly. The same people who ignored my cries for help, who defended him when he hurt me, now spat venom like I'd killed him myself. You broke him! His mother screamed at me over the phone. You ruined his life, and now he's dead because of you. I hung up, shaking. I didn't even realize I was crying until my mom took the phone from my hands. She told me not to answer any more calls, but they didn't stop. Messages poured in. Some hateful, some pretending to be concerned. All of them asking about the funeral. They wanted my son there. Without me, that's when I snapped. The idea that they'd drag my baby, our baby, into that pit of guilt and manipulation made my blood boil. They didn't care about him. They just wanted to parade him around like a symbol, to make themselves feel better, to pretend they were a loving family. I said no, and they lost their minds. They called me selfish, cruel, bitter. I wanted to scream that I was none of those things. I just wanted to protect my child from a world he didn't understand, from a darkness he didn't need to see. But to them, I was the villain in their story, the evil wife who drove him to it. One night, after another round of hateful texts, I found myself sitting in the garden, staring at the stars. My son was asleep inside, and for a moment, the quiet was deafening. That's when the guilt hit me like a wave. Not because I thought I caused his death. I didn't. But because I wondered if I could have stopped it. What if I'd stayed just one more week? What if I hadn't said those words? What if I'd tried to get him help instead of running? I hated myself for even thinking that, because I knew the truth. Staying would have destroyed me, maybe even killed me. But the mind plays cruel tricks when you're grieving. It rewrites the past in softer colors, makes monsters look like victims. I started therapy a few weeks later. My therapist's name was Marlene. Kind eyes, calm voice. The type of person who could make you feel safe just by breathing near you. She told me something I'll never forget. Grief and guilt often wear the same mask, Luna. But they are not the same thing. That line stayed with me. I wrote it down. I repeated it to myself on the nights I couldn't sleep. Slowly, I started piecing myself back together. I began noticing small things. Sunlight through the window, my son's laughter, the way coffee smelled in the morning. Life creeping back in. Healing wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. Gentle, sometimes painful, but it was real. 6 months later, I was sitting in my solicitor's office, signing the final papers for my new home. My own home, a place near my mum. Near safety, the pen shook in my hand as I wrote my name. It wasn't just a signature, it was a promise. To myself, to my son, to the woman I almost lost in all that chaos. When I walked through the door for the first time, my son ran ahead of me, his tiny voice echoing, "Our house, Mummy." And I cried, not because I was sad, but because I finally felt free. I didn't realize how heavy my silence had been until I let it out. And maybe that's why I came back online today, to say thank you to the strangers who cared more for me than the people who should have, to the voices that told me to leave, to run, to live, because if I hadn't listened, I might not be here to tell this story. After the funeral, after the messages stopped flooding in and the world quieted down again, I thought maybe the storm was over. But grief has a way of lingering in places you don't expect. It seeps through the cracks of your calmest days. And just when you think you've rebuilt your peace, it comes knocking again, dressed as something else. For me, it came in the form of a letter. It was late afternoon when it arrived. Plain white envelope. No return address. Just my name written in his handwriting. My heart stuttered. I stood there, frozen in the doorway, holding it like it might burn me. He'd been gone for months. And yet, somehow, here he was again, haunting me from beyond. I took it to my room, sat on the edge of my bed, and stared at it for a long time before finally tearing it open. There were only 3 lines inside. "You took everything from me, but maybe now you'll know how it feels." My breath caught. I dropped the letter like it was poison. My fingers trembled, and before I knew it, tears blurred the words. My mum came rushing in when she heard me sob, and when I showed her, she took one look and said softly, "It's not from him." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe it was some cruel joke or his family trying to manipulate me. But the handwriting, it was too familiar. Every loop, every slant, it was him. Or at least, someone pretending to be. And that's when everything started unraveling again. A few days later, his mother called. She didn't sound angry this time. She sounded sweet. That fake syrupy tone people use when they're about to stab you with a smile. "Luna, darling," she began. "We've been sorting through his things. He had some savings and a small insurance policy. We thought it best that we handle the paperwork. For your sake, of course." My stomach dropped. She wasn't asking. She was telling me. I could practically hear the greed hiding under her voice. The same woman who hadn't offered a single kind word after her son tried to strangle me now wanted control of his money. I calmly told her that I'd already spoken to the solicitor, that everything would go directly through me since I was his wife and the mother of his child. The silence that followed was thick. Then she hissed, "You think you deserve it after what you did?" I hung up. But the next few weeks were hell. Letters started showing up. Fake legal notices. Emails threatening to take me to court. They even showed up at my mum's house once, demanding to see my son, saying I was keeping their grandson from his family. I had to call the police that night. Watching my son peek through the curtains asking, "Who are those people, Mummy?" It shattered me. He didn't remember them. And honestly, I didn't want him to. What they didn't know was that while they were busy plotting, my therapist had helped me gather every piece of evidence. The texts, the threats, the photos, everything. The abuse I endured, the bruises I'd hidden, the nights I'd stayed up crying in fear. I handed it all to my solicitor, and when his family tried to twist the story in court, the truth came crashing down like a wrecking ball. They backed off after that, quietly, suddenly, like shadows retreating from light. But peace, It doesn't come just because your enemies leave you alone. It comes when you stop blaming yourself. And that part took longer than I ever expected. I still saw him in dreams sometimes. The version of him I fell in love with. The man who made me tea when I was sick, who kissed my forehead when I couldn't sleep. The man who promised me forever, and every time I woke up I'd feel this hollow ache in my chest, like I'd lost him all over again. But one day, during therapy, I said something I'd never said before. I missed the version of him that never really existed. Marlene smiled gently and said, "That's how abuse works, Luna. They make you fall in love with the illusion. So even when it's gone, you grieve the fantasy." That hit me like a punch, because it was true. I'd been mourning a ghost, so I started changing the narrative. Every time I caught myself remembering the good, I forced myself to remember the truth too. The bruises, the fear, the control. Not to stay angry, but to stay free. Freedom didn't mean I was healed. It meant I was finally honest with myself. About him, about me, about the life I wanted for my son. He was 3 now. Wild, curious, full of light. He loved dinosaurs, peanut butter sandwiches, and calling every airplane he saw Daddy's star. The first time he said that, I nearly broke down. But instead I smiled and told him, "Maybe it is. Because how do you explain to a child that his father hurt you? That love can sometimes look like danger wearing a smile? You don't. You teach him kindness instead. You show him what real love looks like." One night, as I tucked him in, he looked up at me with those same eyes, his father's eyes, and whispered, "Mummy, you're my hero." And in that moment, I knew. I survived for a reason. Healing isn't this straight upward line people like to talk about. It's messy. Some days you wake up feeling unstoppable, like you finally reclaimed your life. Other days, a scent, a song, or a flicker of memory can drag you right back to the darkness you swore you'd escaped. It was a rainy Thursday when that happened to me again. I'd just moved into my new house. Freshly painted walls, soft curtains, a tiny garden my son and I planted sunflowers in. It was supposed to be a new beginning, a clean slate. But grief, it finds cracks. I was unpacking boxes when I found one I didn't remember packing. It wasn't labeled. Inside, wrapped in an old jumper of his, was a framed photo. Me, him, and our son at the beach. I must have been 6 months pregnant. He had his arms around me. That easy smile that used to make me feel safe. For a few seconds, I forgot everything that came after. Then I saw something else tucked behind the frame. A folded note. My name written in his handwriting again. My heart started racing. I didn't want to read it, but curiosity is a cruel thing. I unfolded it slowly. It wasn't a threat this time. It was short. Just 3 words. I did love you. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just that. And somehow it broke me more than all the anger before. Because if he really did love me, why wasn't it enough to stop him? Why wasn't it enough to protect us? That night, after my son fell asleep, I sat in front of the bathroom mirror and stared at myself for a long time. My reflection didn't look like me anymore. Not the girl who once dreamed of a perfect family. Not the woman who'd endured the worst. Just someone in between, trying to figure out who she was now. I traced the faint line on my neck where his hand had once been. The scar no one could see. The one that wasn't really on my skin, but buried deep in my memory. I whispered to my reflection, "You're still here. You survived." For the first time, those words didn't feel hollow. I started writing letters I never planned to send. Letters to him, to his mother, to myself. I poured out everything I never got to say. The fury, the sadness, the guilt, the gratitude for finally being free. My therapist said it was grief work. I called it reclaiming my voice. Every session, I learned something new about myself. How I'd ignored my instincts for years because I confused control with love. how I'd lost my confidence piece by piece until I barely recognized myself. But also how resilient I really was, how the very parts of me he tried to break were the ones that saved me in the end. It wasn't dramatic healing. There were no big cinematic moments where the clouds parted and light poured in. It was slow, quiet, like the soft hum of life returning after winter. Sometimes, when I looked at my son playing in the garden, I'd feel tears well up, not from sadness, but pride. Because he was growing up in love, not fear. Because every time he laughed, it erased another echo of the screams that used to fill our old house. But the universe wasn't done testing me yet. A few months after moving in, I got a call from my solicitor again. Apparently his family had tried one more trick, filing paperwork to access his life insurance, claiming I wasn't legally entitled because our marriage was unstable. My hands shook as I listened. I could feel the anger boiling again, that old, familiar tremor that came every time I remembered how powerless they'd tried to make me feel. But this time, I wasn't the same woman. I had proof, records, the courage they never expected me to have. I let my solicitor handle everything, and when the case was dismissed, I didn't celebrate. I just breathed. Because peace doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it just feels like silence. That night, after putting my son to bed, I went outside and looked up at the sky. The air was cold, the kind that bites your skin but clears your mind. There was one bright star shining above the rest, unmoving, steady. My son's daddy star. For the first time, I didn't feel bitterness. I didn't feel anger, just a strange, aching kind of forgiveness. Not for him, but for myself. I forgive you, I whispered into the dark. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. And in that silence, I swear I felt something lift, like the ghost that had been living inside me finally let go. The next morning I woke up lighter. My son crawled into my bed, giggling, his little hands cold from the morning air. "Mummy, wake up! The sun's out!" I smiled and hugged him tight. "Yeah, baby, the sun's finally out." You'd think after everything, the grief, the therapy, the endless battles, that I'd finally be done with surprises. But trauma has this way of leaving doors half open, and sometimes the past doesn't die quietly. It started one ordinary afternoon. My solicitor called again, but this time her tone was different. Cautious, almost uneasy. She said a box of my husband's old belongings had been released by the authorities. "There's something in it you should probably see yourself," she said. My hands went cold. I told her to send it over. A week later it arrived. A plain brown parcel sealed with evidence tape. I waited until my son was asleep before opening it. Inside were random things: his wallet, keys, a crumpled pack of cigarettes, a cheap watch. But tucked underneath was a small black notebook. The sight of it made my stomach twist. I knew that notebook. He used to carry it everywhere, said it was where he kept ideas for his future business. But as I flipped through it, my breath caught. It wasn't business notes. It was pages and pages of writing, messy, angry scrawls. Some entries were mundane, others terrifying. She thinks she can control me. If she leaves, I'll take everything from her. She ruins everything good in my life. I froze, my pulse thundering in my ears. Then, halfway through, I found something else. A single line written days before he died. If I can't have her, no one should. I dropped the notebook. My whole body was shaking. My therapist's words flashed in my head. Abuse isn't about anger. It's about control. That's what this was, his final attempt to control me, even in death. I don't remember how long I sat there staring at the floor. When I finally picked up the notebook again, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt empty. But in that emptiness, there was also clarity. For the first time, I truly saw the man behind the mask. The one I'd made excuses for, forgiven, defended. The notebook wasn't just his darkness. It was my closure. It was proof that leaving had saved me, that none of this was my fault. I burned it that night in the garden. I watched the flames curl around the pages, the ink melting into black smoke. My hands didn't tremble. My eyes didn't sting. It was like watching a ghost disintegrate. When the fire died, all that was left was ash. Quiet, harmless. The next morning I told my therapist about it. She smiled softly and said, "You didn't destroy evidence, Luna. You destroyed his hold on you." That day, something shifted in me. I started allowing myself to live again. Really live. I took my son to the zoo, started a part-time job, even reconnected with old friends I hadn't seen in years. At first it felt strange, like wearing someone else's life, but slowly, it became mine again. Every night, I'd tuck my son into bed and tell him a little story about bravery, kindness, or how storms always end eventually. Sometimes, I realized I was really telling those stories to myself. Months later, while sorting through more boxes, I found an old pregnancy ultrasound, the one from before the miscarriage. I held it to my chest and whispered, "I'll never forget you." And in a way, that loss, as cruel as it was, had guided me to my rebirth. I thought about how far I'd come, from that terrified woman on the bathroom floor to someone who could finally breathe without fear. It didn't happen overnight. It took tears, panic attacks, therapy sessions where I could barely speak. But here I was, standing, steady, whole. Sometimes I wonder if he ever truly realized what he'd done. If he ever looked at himself and saw the monster he'd become. I'll never know. But I've stopped needing that answer. Because the truth is, closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you build, piece by piece, like a mosaic made from shattered glass. And when it's done, when you finally step back and look at it, it's beautiful. Not because it's perfect, but because it's yours. Now, whenever people ask if I hate him, I say no. Hate would mean he still mattered. What I feel now is peace. What I have now is freedom. I still visit the beach sometimes, the one from that photo. I sit there with my son, watch him run through the waves, and let the wind carry away the ghosts of what used to be. Sometimes, I whisper a quiet goodbye to the ocean, just in case he's listening, and then I smile. Because the story that once started with pain, ended with me choosing life. If you were in my place, if the person you loved turned into your nightmare, but the world blamed you for surviving, would you still forgive them? Comment below, and never forget, walking away isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you'll ever do. It's strange how healing doesn't arrive like a sunrise. It doesn't just flood in one morning and make everything bright again. It comes in flickers, like a candle trying not to go out. That's how it was for me. Small moments that at first felt insignificant. A laugh that didn't feel forced. A night where I finally slept through without waking up in panic. A morning where I looked in the mirror and didn't see a ghost. It had been over a year since I burned that notebook when I got invited to speak at a small community event for domestic abuse survivors. I almost said no. Public speaking? Me? I could barely tell my story to my therapist without breaking down. But something inside me whispered, if you don't speak, someone else might never find their voice. The night before the event, I sat at my desk with a blank page in front of me. I didn't know where to start. How do you condense years of pain, guilt, and rediscovery into a few minutes? Then I remembered something my therapist once said. Don't tell your story to be understood. Tell it so someone else doesn't feel alone. So that's what I did. The next day, standing under the soft yellow lights of that small hall, I told my truth. My voice shook at first. My hands trembled. But as I looked out at those faces, women, men, even teenagers, I saw it. The same pain, the same quiet understanding in their eyes. And suddenly I wasn't scared anymore. I spoke about the manipulation, the isolation, the fear that eats you alive slowly. But I also spoke about hope. About how surviving doesn't make you broken. It makes you unbreakable. When I finished, the room was silent. Then one woman stood up. Tears were streaming down her face as she said, "I thought I was the only one." That sentence alone made everything worth it. After the event, people came up to me, sharing their own stories, hugging me, thanking me. For the first time, my pain felt like it had a purpose. I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living for something bigger. That night, when I came home, my son ran to me with his usual bright smile. "Mommy, how was your speech?" he asked. I knelt down, hugged him tight, and whispered, "It was brave." He didn't understand fully, but one day he will. And when he does, I hope he'll see not a woman who was broken, but one who rebuilt herself from ashes. I decided to start a small support group. At first, it was just 5 of us, sitting in a circle in a rented room with bad lighting and cheap coffee. But it grew. Fast. Within months, there were dozens. People who'd been silent for years finally had a space to speak. And every story, every tear, every trembling confession reminded me how powerful it is to simply be heard. Sometimes I'd go home and cry after meetings. Not out of sadness, but out of relief. Because in helping them heal, I was healing too. Then one afternoon, I got an email from a journalist. She'd heard about our group and wanted to feature it in an article. My first instinct was panic. I didn't want attention, I just wanted peace. But I remembered that scared version of myself, the one who thought no one would believe her. Maybe this was my chance to be the voice she needed back then. The article went viral, not in a flashy way, but quietly powerful. Hundreds of messages poured in from people around the world. Some thanked me for sharing. Others asked for help. And a few just said, "You gave me hope." That was when I realized something. The story that once almost destroyed me was now saving others. My pain had turned into purpose. My past had become someone else's lifeline. A few months later, I revisited the house where it all began. It was empty now, sold off, forgotten by the world. I stood outside, staring at the windows that once hid so many screams. For a second, I could almost see my old self through the glass. Scared, small, desperate to be loved. I whispered to her, "You made it." And I swear, for just a moment, I felt her smile back. As I walked away, the wind carried the faint smell of rain. The sky was gray, but there was light behind the clouds. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt truly free. They say scars tell stories. Mine do too. But mine don't whisper pain anymore. They whisper power. And if you're watching this, maybe trapped in your own silence, I want you to know this. It's not your fault. You deserve peace. You deserve safety. You deserve to live. Don't wait for someone to rescue you. You are the hero of your own story. Because if I could crawl out of the darkness, you can too. And when you finally do, I'll be right here, waiting to tell you. Welcome back. People think healing is this beautiful, glowing process. Like you rise from the ashes one day and everything finally makes sense. But in reality, healing feels more like grief that learned how to breathe. You learn to live with the silence, with the memories that still echo in the background. You just stop letting them drown you. It's been almost 2 years now since I left him. Sometimes I still catch myself reaching for my phone, thinking I need to text him when something funny happens with our son. Then I remember, he's gone. And that realization always comes with this strange, hollow ache. Not because I miss him, but because I miss the version of me who still believed love could fix everything. My therapist once told me, Closure isn't when you stop crying. It's when you stop asking why. And she was right. I stopped asking a long time ago. There are questions that don't have answers, only lessons. I've made peace with the fact that I'll never understand what went through his mind the day he ended his life. I'll never know if it was guilt, shame, despair, or something darker. I used to torture myself thinking maybe I could have stopped it. Maybe if I stayed. Maybe if I'd said something different. But the truth is, I couldn't have saved him without losing myself completely. And I've already died once. Now, I live. Some mornings I wake up to the sound of my son giggling in the kitchen as my mom tries to make pancakes. And that sound, it's my new heartbeat. It reminds me that no matter how deep the darkness was, I still found light again. When we moved into our new house, a small sunlit place near my family, I made a promise. No more fear. No more silence. I framed a photo of me and my son in the hallway. He's smiling so wide, his curls messy from the wind. Under it I wrote in tiny letters, "We made it." There are still nights when the weight of everything catches up to me, when I lie awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the ghost of hands that once tried to take my breath away. But then I hear my son's soft breathing from the next room and I remind myself, I'm here. He's safe. We're free. That's what survival looks like. Not perfection. Not forgetting, just breathing without apology. A few months ago, I got a message on social media. It was from a woman I'd never met. She said, "I watched your story. I was packing my things to leave my husband, terrified, shaking. And then I saw your video. I didn't stop. I walked out. You saved my life." I cried so hard that night. Because maybe, in some strange way, that's what this was all for. Maybe I went through hell so someone else wouldn't have to. Sometimes people call me brave. I don't think I am. Brave would have been walking away the first time he raised his voice. Brave would have been knowing my worth before he broke it. No, I'm not brave. I'm just done. Done living small. Done apologizing for surviving. I visit his grave once a year. Not out of love, but out of closure. I bring a single white lily. Not red, not roses, just white. Purity. Peace. I stand there quietly, and I don't cry anymore. I just whisper, "I forgive you." Because I had to, for me. Holding hate is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. After I leave, I take my son to the park nearby. He loves the swings. He laughs when I push him higher and higher. The sound of his laughter mixes with the rustling of the trees, and for a moment, it feels like the world is finally right again. I used to think my story ended when he died. That was the last chapter, but it wasn't. It was just the turning of a page. My story didn't end in tragedy. It began in survival. And to everyone watching this right now, maybe you're sitting in the dark, scared, confused, wondering if anyone would believe you, wondering if leaving will destroy your world. I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me sooner. Staying will destroy it faster. You deserve peace. You deserve laughter that doesn't make you flinch. You deserve love that doesn't hurt. So if you're listening to this and you feel that lump in your throat, that quiet voice saying, "That's me," then please, listen to it. That's your soul asking for freedom. I know it's terrifying. I know it feels impossible. But I promise you, on the other side of fear is peace you can't even imagine. One day you'll wake up, sunlight will spill across your pillow, and you'll realize you survived the storm that was meant to drown you. And maybe like me, you'll even find yourself telling your story. Not because you want pity, but because you want someone else to know they can survive too. I'm Luna. I lost everything I thought I was. And I found who I was meant to be. If you were in my situation, what would you have done? Would you have stayed? Or would you have walked away, knowing it might be the hardest, yet most freeing, decision of your life? Comment below. I'll be reading every single one. And if you've ever crawled out of darkness, hit that subscribe button, because your story deserves to be heard too. Because in the end, surviving isn't the end of the story, it's just the beginning. The screen fades from black. You can hear faint rain. Not the kind that rages, but the kind that soothes. The frame slowly brightens to reveal a quiet morning, a window half open, curtains swaying gently, and sunlight, warm, golden, pouring in like forgiveness. That's my window. That's my house. My peace. I sit on the edge of my bed, holding a cup of tea between my palms, watching the raindrops slide down the glass. For a long time, I couldn't even enjoy mornings. They reminded me of all the days I used to wake up terrified. But now, mornings feel sacred. They remind me that I made it through another night. My son runs into the room, his laughter echoing down the hallway. He's taller now. His curls bounce when he moves. His eyes carry that unfiltered joy only children have. He jumps onto the bed and says, "Mommy, the rain stopped. Can we go outside?" I smile. "Yeah, baby. Let's go see the world." We step out barefoot. The earth smells like renewal. The sky is still heavy with clouds, but between them, a break, just enough for sunlight to pierce through. My son stretches his arms wide and spins in the yard, his laughter melting into the air. For a moment, I just watch him, and then I look up. You know, people say that storms destroy things, but I've learned something different. Sometimes storms don't destroy, they reveal. They wash away everything that isn't meant for you, everything that kept you blind to your own strength. They leave you standing, soaked and trembling, but still standing. I think back to the night I left him. The shaking hands, the muffled sobs, the weight of fear pressing on my chest. I remember thinking I'll never survive this, and yet, here I am, breathing, laughing, living. The shot cuts to me walking down a path near my new house, trees on both sides, leaves dancing in the breeze. My narration continues softly. I used to measure my worth by how much pain I could endure, how much silence I could swallow, how small I could make myself to keep someone else comfortable. But not anymore. My worth isn't in my suffering. It's in my survival. The music swells gently, piano and strings, tender and cinematic. I used to think my story was about pain. But it's not. It's about freedom. About learning that love should never make you afraid. That sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is walk away. Cut to my son running ahead, his tiny feet splashing through puddles. He turns around and shouts, "Come on, Mommy!" And I do. I run. I laugh. I let the rain touch my face. For the first time in years, I don't wipe it away. It feels cleansing. Like the sky itself is saying, "You're forgiven." There's a voiceover fade. They say time heals all wounds. I don't think that's true. Time doesn't heal. It gives you space to heal yourself. It teaches you that scars don't mean you're broken. They mean you survived something that tried to end you. Cut to a soft montage. Me decorating our small home, helping my son draw rainbows on the wall, drinking tea with my mum, sitting in therapy smiling for the first time. Every scene quieter, softer, like peace learning to exist again. Then a quick cut. My hands lighting a small candle on the windowsill. Not for grief this time, but gratitude. For the longest time, I thought the darkness was the end of me. But now I see it was just the beginning of who I was meant to be. The screen fades to a warm golden hue. My silhouette standing in the window's light, holding my son's hand. The music slows. If you're listening to this, and you're still in your storm, I want you to know something. The sky will clear. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it will. And when it does, you'll see yourself clearly for the first time. Not as a victim, but as the storm that survived. A pause. Only the soft hum of the rain remains. Then, the final line. Whispered, intimate. The kind that lingers long after the screen goes dark. You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become after. The music fades, screen cuts to black. The final title appears in white letters. In memory of every woman who found her voice after silence. Then the outro voiceover. If this story touched you, please share it. Someone out there needs to hear that survival is possible. And if you've ever found strength in your pain, subscribe. Because this space is for survivors who became warriors. It's funny how quiet peace can be. For so long, I thought peace would feel loud, like a celebration, or a song or fireworks marking the end of the war inside me. But it doesn't. It's quiet. So quiet that sometimes I still hold my breath just to make sure it's really there. The world moves on. Even when you feel stuck in the same chapter, the sun still rises, the clock still ticks, and one day, you realize you've been moving too. Not forward, not backward, just somewhere new. My therapist once told me, healing isn't becoming who you were before. It's accepting that you'll never be that person again. I didn't understand that then, but I do now. I'm not the same Luna who begged someone to love her enough not to hurt her. I'm not the same Luna who thought forgiveness meant erasing herself. I've changed. And for once that doesn't scare me. There are still traces of the past. Sometimes I'll be walking down the street, and I'll hear a man raise his voice, not even in anger, just loud, and my whole body will freeze. It's like my bones remember what my mind wants to forget. Or I'll smell that cologne, the one he used to wear, and suddenly I'm back there, in that house, in that moment. My chest tightens, my vision blurs, and then I breathe. It doesn't control me anymore. It still visits me, but it doesn't live here. One night a few weeks ago, I woke up from a nightmare. In it, I was trapped in that room again. The door wouldn't open, no matter how hard I pushed. I woke up drenched in sweat, shaking, gasping for air. My son was asleep beside me, his little hand resting on mine. I stared at him for a long time, his calm face, his slow breathing, and whispered to myself, "You're safe now." I think I needed to hear it from my own mouth. When I told my therapist about the dream, she smiled gently and said, "That's your body trying to finish a story it never got to end." I cried when she said that, because she was right. For years, my body was in survival mode, waiting for the next explosion, the next bruise, the next apology that would never come. Now my body's learning it doesn't have to be ready for war anymore. You know what's strange? I don't hate him. Not anymore. There was a time I did. A time when hate was the only thing keeping me alive. But hate is heavy. It eats at you from the inside, like acid. So one day, I just put it down. Not for him. For me. I forgave him in silence. I didn't write a letter. Didn't speak to his family. Didn't stand over his grave to say it out loud. I just sat under the sky one night, looked up at the stars and whispered, "I forgive you." Then I sat there, waiting to feel something. Anger, relief, sadness. But all I felt was stillness, and that's how I knew I was free. Freedom isn't loud, it's quiet. It's the moment you stop needing answers. It's when your past stops feeling like a weight and starts feeling like a map. Something that led you here, even if it hurt like hell. Sometimes when I look back, I don't even recognize that version of myself. The girl who walked on eggshells in her own home. The one who apologized for things she didn't do. The one who thought she deserved it. I want to hold her and tell her she was never weak. She was surviving the only way she knew how. And to anyone listening to me right now, maybe you're still in that phase. Maybe you're still trying to rationalize why the person you love keeps hurting you. Maybe you're still hoping they'll change. I know that hope. I clung to it until it nearly killed me. But let me tell you something I wish I'd heard sooner. Love isn't meant to be survived. It's meant to feel safe, gentle, soft. If you have to shrink to fit inside it, it's not love. When I finally left, I thought I was walking away from love, but I was walking toward myself. These days, I'm learning new kinds of love. Love that doesn't demand silence. Love that doesn't punish you for existing. Love that looks like my son's laughter, my mother's warm hug, a quiet evening with a book, and a mind that finally feels like a safe place to live in. Healing doesn't mean I don't miss what could have been. It means I'm no longer haunted by what was. I've been writing again. Small things. Journals, poems, pieces that will never see the world. But they remind me that words can be soft again, not just weapons. Sometimes I write letters to myself. To the girl who was 25 and scared. To the woman who thought she was broken. To the mother who almost gave up. And in those letters, I tell her everything she needed to hear but never did. Like, you were never too much. You deserved better. You made it out. Every time I write those words, I feel the weight lift a little more. I remember the day I signed the papers for my new house. My hand was shaking so much the pen slipped twice. The agent smiled and said, "First-time buyer nerves?" I wanted to tell her, "No, this is the first time I've ever written my name without fear attached to it." When I got the keys, I just sat on the living room floor for hours. No furniture, no noise, just me and silence. And for once, the silence didn't scare me. It comforted me. That night, I tucked my son into bed. He looked up and asked, "Mommy, are we safe now?" I smiled through tears. "Yeah, baby. We are." That's all he needed. That's all I needed. I still have bad days. Healing isn't a straight line. Some mornings I wake up heavy, like grief never left. But I remind myself, I'm allowed to feel that. I'm allowed to not be okay. That's part of healing too. But every day I get a little stronger. Every day I reclaim a little more of myself. Every day I choose peace. Not because it's easy, but because I finally know I deserve it. So to anyone listening, if you're still trapped in someone else's storm, please know that peace is possible. You won't find it overnight, but you will find it, piece by piece, breath by breath, moment by moment. And when you do, it'll feel like sunlight through rain. Sometimes I think back to that version of me, standing in the rain, suitcase in hand, shaking, terrified, heartbroken. I wish I could go back, hold her hand, and tell her, "One day you'll tell this story, and people will cry, and they'll heal with you." Because that's what this is, isn't it? Not an ending, a beginning, a life rebuilt from the ashes of what was meant to destroy me. I don't need a fairy tale anymore. I just need quiet mornings, honest laughter, and love that doesn't hurt. And maybe that's what happiness really is. Peace that doesn't need to be loud to feel real. If you've made it this far, thank you. For listening, for feeling, for being here. Because maybe this story isn't just mine. Maybe it's yours too. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you have stayed? Or found the courage to walk away, even when it meant walking into the unknown? comment below, because maybe your answer will help someone else find theirs. And if you've ever survived something you thought you couldn't, subscribe. Not for me, for you. Because your voice matters. Because your story deserves to be heard. Because survival is just the first chapter. I think I needed to hear it from my own mouth. When I told my therapist about the dream, she smiled gently and said, "That's your body trying to finish a story it never got to end." I cried when she said that, because she was right. For years, my body was in survival mode, waiting for the next explosion, the next bruise, the next apology that would never come. Now my body's learning it doesn't have to be ready for war anymore. You know what's strange? I don't hate him. Not anymore. There was a time I did. A time when hate was the only thing keeping me alive. But hate is heavy. It eats at you from the inside, like acid. So one day, I just put it down. Not for him. For me. I forgave him in silence. I didn't write a letter, didn't speak to his family, didn't stand over his grave to say it out loud. I just sat under the sky one night, looked up at the stars and whispered, "I forgive you." Then I sat there, waiting to feel something. Anger, relief, sadness. But all I felt was stillness, and that's how I knew I was free. Freedom isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the moment you stop needing answers. It's when your past stops feeling like a weight and starts feeling like a map. Something that led you here, even if it hurt like hell. Sometimes when I look back, I don't even recognize that version of myself. The girl who walked on eggshells in her own home. The one who apologized for things she didn't do. The one who thought she deserved it. I want to hold her and tell her she was never weak. She was surviving the only way she knew how. And to anyone listening to me right now, maybe you're still in that phase. Maybe you're still trying to rationalize why the person you love keeps hurting you. Maybe you're still hoping they'll change. I know that hope. I clung to it until it nearly killed me. But let me tell you something I wish I'd heard sooner. Love isn't meant to be survived. It's meant to feel safe, gentle, soft. If you have to shrink to fit inside it, it's not love. When I finally left, I thought I was walking away from love, but I was walking toward myself. These days, I'm learning new kinds of love. Love that doesn't demand silence. Love that doesn't punish you for existing. Love that looks like my son's laughter, my mother's warm hug, a quiet evening with a book, and a mind that finally feels like a safe place to live in. Healing doesn't mean I don't miss what could have been. It means I'm no longer haunted by what was. I've been writing again. Small things. Journals, poems, pieces that will never see the world. But they remind me that words can be soft again, not just weapons. Sometimes I write letters to myself. To the girl who was 25 and scared. To the woman who thought she was broken. To the mother who almost gave up. And in those letters, I tell her everything she needed to hear but never did. Like, you were never too much. You deserved better. You made it out. Every time I write those words, I feel the weight lift a little more. I remember the day I signed the papers for my new house. My hand was shaking so much the pen slipped twice. The agent smiled and said, "First-time buyer nerves?" I wanted to tell her, "No, this is the first time I've ever written my name without fear attached to it." When I got the keys, I just sat on the living room floor for hours. No furniture, no noise, just me and silence. And for once, the silence didn't scare me. It comforted me. That night, I tucked my son into bed. He looked up and asked, "Mommy, are we safe now?" I smiled through tears. "Yeah, baby. We are." That's all he needed. That's all I needed. I still have bad days. Healing isn't a straight line. Some mornings I wake up heavy, like grief never left. But I remind myself, I'm allowed to feel that. I'm allowed to not be okay. That's part of healing too. But every day I get a little stronger. Every day I reclaim a little more of myself. Every day I choose peace. Not because it's easy, but because I finally know I deserve it. So to anyone listening, if you're still trapped in someone else's storm, please know that peace is possible. You won't find it overnight, but you will find it, piece by piece, breath by breath, moment by moment. And when you do, it'll feel like sunlight through rain. Sometimes I think back to that version of me, standing in the rain, suitcase in hand, shaking, terrified, heartbroken. I wish I could go back, hold her hand, and tell her, "One day you'll tell this story, and people will cry, and they'll heal with you." Because that's what this is, isn't it? Not an ending, a beginning, a life rebuilt from the ashes of what was meant to destroy me. I don't need a fairy tale anymore. I just need quiet mornings, honest laughter, and love that doesn't hurt. And maybe that's what happiness really is. Peace that doesn't need to be loud to feel real. If you've made it this far, thank you. For listening, for feeling, for being here. Because maybe this story isn't just mine. Maybe it's yours too. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you have stayed? Or found the courage to walk away, even when it meant walking into the unknown? Comment below. Because maybe your answer will help someone else find theirs. And if you've ever survived something you thought you couldn't, subscribe. Not for me, for you. Because your voice matters. Because your story deserves to be heard. Because survival is just the first chapter.